Well, I've done this before, so I'll do it again. Twice a year, both spring and fall, they have a rummage sale in town. It's in a auditorium, and they fill it up with vendors. So I always go in there because you never know what you're going to find, and I've got some really excellent deals out of there. So I always make a point of going, even though I have been really busy this week, which is why I haven't done a lot of videos. But I figured I'd take the morning off and run in there and do that, and I'm glad I did. But then I went and worked until it started raining, and I put an end to it, which is good in a way because there's things I have to do at home. But one of the things that I bought today was $30 for this brand new, it's a Clark toolbox. Now, I'm really not familiar with Clark, but I would have to say it's really heavy. Really wouldn't make much of a portable toolbox. But what I had been thinking about was a toolbox to put my reloading stuff in. Because I've always kind of had a quandary about how to handle my turrets. I've got many of these, and I was looking for a decent way of storing those. Now this box has got enough clearance that the cover will close with the turret in there. So what I'm going to do is put like a 1-inch foam block in here and then cut out so I can drop turrets in, and I should be able to get at least a dozen of them in there, and I think that's about how many I have. But that'll work good to keep them organized and out of the way. And then I can use the bottom, it's got drawers for a lot of the other reloading tools that I use all the time. There's a little room off the bench and keep things organized. Where I have trouble is when I start pounding on the loom, it tends to shake things off the reloading bench. So if I can get everything in here organized, I'll be in good shape. But like I say, I'll put a foam block in here and make the cutouts, and then I can actually label them so I don't have to, like this happens to be for the 32 Winchester Special. But, some of them it's a little hard to see what they're for. If I get them organized and then label them, I'll be in good shape. And I also picked up some of this drawer lining stuff. Like I said, I'll put a block on the top, but for the drawers, I'll use this foam stuff. Keeps things from banging around. And it was funny because I saw this stuff and I thought, well, it'd be good if I could find a toolbox. Well, then I found a toolbox and it had a heck of a time to find this again. I was afraid it had got sold, but it was in there. So that'll go. What I've got right now under the reloading bench, I've got a cabinet that rolls, it's got a door and a drawer. And this will fit on top of that cabinet. So that'll make it handy and be a little more organized. I also got one of these. They're old house jacks. Just a big old screw jack. These things have been around for a long time. I can't read the patent date, but it's a Badger brand. But, 10-inch screw. Be handy working with them logs for leveling things out. Picked up a fine little chopper, mostly because it's really good steel. To me, what I'd like to do actually is to move the handle down closer. I find myself a lot of times when I'm using a knife skinning or something, I'll be gripping by the blade. Well, if I could get the handle down closer, I think I might make a useful deal out of that. And that was only like $1. A lot of stuff you end up with $1. Fine screwdriver. Well, and this has got a particular purpose. I always have trouble to get the distributor out of the M37. I use a Mosin bayonet because that's long enough and it works like a screwdriver. This might replace my Mosin bayonet because I think this will do the long reach, because I've got to replace the points before winter. I want to do that. And to replace points, you have to blow a distributor on them. And I was lucky I happened to get 2 sets of new points. I didn't want to buy the cheap aftermarket points. So I was able to find 2 new sets of points in Vietnam from, when we skedaddled out of Vietnam, we left all the spare parts there. So now if you want parts for old American Army equipment, you got to go to Vietnam. But I got 2 good new sets of points. Bunch of spools of thread for $3. Now these are the old wood spools at Coates and Clark, but it's not normal thread. It's that really heavy, like button thread. So that's kind of good to have for rough stitching. And this is a Craftsman file holder. It's got a chuck in it that you can actually stick the handle of a file in, then you tighten it down so you got a decent handle. I've seen various types of these and none that work real good. This actually looks like it'll be a good solid grip on her. So I think this was well worth the $3. And Craftsman stuff, especially the older stuff, pretty good. Baking powder can. The problem I have a lot of times, baking powder now comes in, got a cardboard with plastic lid. Well, the cardboard gets soft and your baking powder gets air in it. It goes bad. Now it's starting to rain again, so I got to hurry this up. A book, Ernie Pyle. Early war correspondent. Heck of a good guy, heck of a good writer. I like reading his stuff. Okay. Air pump. Now this is one of the air pumps for the old, like Coleman made gas lamps, and they made irons that ran on gas. And it was before they had the pump built in. They used an air pump. Well, somebody had a brand new air pump for $1. Didn't know what it was. They didn't, but I did. Bunch of old motorcycle magazines. Like this one's from 1956. But I love these old ones. Interesting because I like old bikes. New ones kind of leave me cold, but these old ones are interesting. So these are all 50s and 60s. And they're great. You got the road test on the Ariel Square 4. The old Indian signals. Just really interesting stuff. There's one here on the 68 Sportster. Back when Harley was making a sporting bike. Those old 900s, if you've never ridden one of them, you're missing something, because they were a nice bike. Probably one of the nicest bikes Harley ever made. But that's the haul for this year. I can get it inside and filled up.